right, so an interesting sort of relationship dynamic and communication skill sort of thing that came into focus today for me was a lot of times in arguments, what will happen is some underlying issue will reoccur, and it'll be something that is unresolved because the underlying issue was not ever fully either discussed or allowed to be discussed. And so the argument will take place, and then the argument will turn into it'll turn into a conflict of two people disagreeing about what happened, what took place. And one person will say, well, this happened, and the other person will say, well, this is what I thought happened. And before they're really able to get to the point, that the more important issue that needed to be explained, talked about, expressed by one of the people, it will turn into competing to have their version of events be accepted by the other person. But the reality is it's not important. It's not important to say what literally happened in this moment, because both people are so entrenched in their point of view that it doesn't matter what the other person's point of view is of what happened. The only thing that matters is that both people are able to speak what their actual point of view is. Now, where this gets tricky is when one of the people insists to make it an argument about what their version of events was, and when the other person is trying to not so much argue with what their version of events was, but more go to the point of what the underlying complaint is about the reoccurring problem that they find. And so often this arguing about whose version is right is often a smokescreen in order to block the real thing that is that the person is trying to convey, where they have a problem with the other person. And if this is done in good faith, arguments can leave both people feeling relieved after the argument took place. Because arguments are a natural part of life. Because arguments are not just about logical assessment of what a situation is, but it's about expressing emotional energy that is stored up. And most arguments are really about a way in which one person feels blocked from coming to a resolution within themselves, to find to be absolved of having to carry around emotional extra weight and baggage. And when we feel inhibited from speaking our point of view and what our problem is with the other person, often what we will do is, because we're so frustrated that our point of view is never really allowing to be heard, because it's being turned into an argument that deflects what we're trying to convey, then we're left with this frustration of, this person really does not want to hear what I have to say, so I'm not going to let that stand alone. I'm going to, fine. If they want to fight me on this, then I will fight them with the same tactics that they're using against me. So then both people will end up arguing about, trivial things that are on the surface, and they'll argue about whose version of events was correct, rather than really seeing, oh, hey, there's an issue here. Okay, we need to resolve this issue. How do we resolve issues? We all know how to resolve issues. We give the other person space to talk until they've said their piece, until the emotional energy is discharged. And yes, it takes a little bit of mindfulness, and it takes a little bit of attentiveness to be able to step back and say, okay, you will have your turn, and then I will have my turn. Without needing to interject. Well, you didn't understand this point of view. You didn't understand this correctly. You didn't understand. Wait a minute, you're misrepresenting me. Who cares? It doesn't matter if they misrepresent you. Allow them to misrepresent you. Get it off their chest, and likely their point of view about the whole situation will change once they've expressed their point of view fully and completely. And when they've gone into the underlying thing that really bothered them about your behavior, then they will feel safe with you again, because now they realize, oh, I'm not being gaslit by this person. Oh, I have room to be a human being with this person, and this person sees me, and yeah, maybe there's still some disagreement about some minor detail or something. Or maybe there's still some misunderstanding, maybe you don't fully quite understand the other person, but you can see where they're coming from, and you understand how they got there. And it's not just about you and them, it's about them and everything that has happened to them in the past, and where they're at now emotionally with you. And the best way to find the peace back in a relationship is to essentially, it's really simple, but most people really just don't do it, because I don't know. We have a real lack of emotional courage in the modern world, of being able to just hear any sort of, it's because most people are so pent up with feeling like they've never been acknowledged, that as soon as they feel like, if I just give them a little bit of room, I'll never be able to get the room back. I'll have to listen to them for 20 minutes ranting, and they're going to dominate me, and I'll never get my say, and so I don't really want to give them that again, so I'm going to block them from saying anything more, because I don't want to be more emotionally upset than I'm already am with them. And to some extent, this is understandable. If one of the two people in the relationship wants to, take up all the space, do their emotional dump onto you, blast you with all their feelings, and then you don't get to say anything in response because then as soon as you say something, now they want to emotionally react to you and not give you that space. And that's an unfortunate circumstance to be in. And, some people are like this. They will not give the space that they take from others, and they'll hog it. But those type of people we don't want to have relationships with, honestly. And if we do, we really need to, I mean, this is where, as a Western society, we have a problem. We have a problem with allowing anger where it needs to be allowed. People need to be able to, if somebody is blocking you emotionally, you have to be able to raise your level of assertiveness. And anger is it's a necessary component of being a healthy human being, and it's a healthy response to somebody who's trying to take up all the emotional space. And sometimes we need to raise the emotional, volume of our speaking voice so that we can get past a blockade of somebody who's trying to block us from speaking, and we just need to discharge that energy. And obviously we don't want to get physically violent, but we need to be able to have, adults need to be able to have verbally intense conversations, and they need to be able to allowed to raise their voice and not feel like they're going to be demonized. Well, you yelled at me. She yelled at me and he yelled at me, so automatically they lose the argument if they yell. So it doesn't matter how much emotionally abusive, manipulative bullshit that someone does to you. As soon as a person who's, been bullied and, in the more subtle ways, as soon as they try to assert themselves in a more angry, direct way of trying to finally cut through the bullshit and say, hey, no, I'm going to take space up in this conversation, and I'm going to have my space, and I'm going to have my say, and you're going to be quiet, and you're going to listen. And then the person says, oh, no, you can't do that. You're not allowed to yell. That's evil. That's bad. We don't do that here in America. Freedom of speech? No, fuck that shit. Not if you're yelling, You gotta be able to be emotionally intense, and you gotta be able to have enough of a fucking thick skin as an adult to be able to hear a higher level of, emotional intensity, because being an adult means dealing with stronger feelings and to learn how to be articulate in the midst of anger and frustration. And so both people need to have room to have their space, to have their say. And sometimes it can get intense and it can be scary, but if both people have the courage to listen to the other person through the emotionality, through the intensity, to really say where they're feeling, where they're at feeling wise, and what their best logical observation is, their best ability to be rational in the midst of this, then a resolution will take place, and it doesn't take place by sweeping it under the rug or shaming the other person for getting too intense. If the other person, if you watch the other person being more and more intense, the question is, why are they getting more and more intense? Is it because we're doing something to block them and then saying, oh, you can't go there. We don't want you to go there. You're not allowed to go there. That's where people start raising their intensity. They only tend to raise their intensity when they feel blocked by us. When they feel they have to raise their energy in order to express themselves. And this is, this is obviously, you treat adults different than you treat children. You don't yell at children 90% of the time. Sometimes we get angry and we make mistakes and we yell at children. And, we shouldn't be demonized for that either. But as a rule, we should not yell at children. But with adults, because most of us have all sorts of fucked up shit inside of us. We need to be able to be intense with each other from time to time. And it needs to not be like a thing that can be used against a person where they automatically they're completely discredited at any point of view that they have. If they were angry, no longer valid, So anyhow, I just, my main point is that I wanted to talk about was, I'll reiterate it, is often what will happen in an argument is people will get hung up on what version of reality is true, when the real thing that needs to be talked about gets ignored because of this getting hung up on going, well, you said this. No, that's not what I said. This is what I actually said. And then, so like when you're like, both people are like doing this defensive maneuvers to like try to reinforce their point of view of what happened. It doesn't really matter so much what happened, except what the other point, what the person's real issue was that was underlying. And, talking about whose point of view is correct is a way of deflecting and steering away from really understanding, coming to a real understanding of what the other person's point of view is. Because as long as we're arguing, well, this is not what happened, this is what happened, we're not listening to, well, if they believe that that is what happened, let's find out why they believe that happened. They may not be correct, and that doesn't really matter. We need to understand why they believe what they believe. And the only way we can understand it is by listening. And if what we're doing is the reality of what we're doing is trying to not let information land in us because it threatens our sense of reality and our sense of self, then what we're doing is just delaying the problem and pushing it off into the future. And we're going to run into this issue again because we still haven't fully received the message that the other person is trying to convey. And really, what it comes down to often is not so much that we change our behavior. It's just that the other person feels powerful enough in the relationship that they feel like they have the room to speak and an equal room to express themselves. Our autonomy should not be in jeopardy because somebody else had the room to speak in a conversation. We should be able to listen to conflicting points of view without our entire sense of self-worth being put on, the chopping block because we feel so weak and insecure emotionally that we can't hear anything negative about ourselves from other people who come to their opinions based on a cocktail of all sorts of things. The things that they may say about us may be partially true, they may be somewhat off the mark, but it's where they're on the mark that's where we want to say, hey, maybe they have a point here about this, and maybe that's something that I can work on and be more helpful. And maybe and a lot of times this, by listening to the part that makes where they're on the mark, it's actually helpful for us, because it'll give us an opportunity to behave in a way that is more in alignment socially and within ourselves, and have a better way, healthier way of interacting with people. And so, anyhow, just some, I love, whenever I have a new insight, I love to record it. I love to put it on the camera. I love to listen back to it to see, what is it that I conveyed? How well did I convey it? And, I think it really does help me in my relationships to be more expressive and to feel more certain about the words that I'm saying, and that I'm being fair in what, my assessment is, and to, that the real purpose behind me speaking is to communicate something, and not just to, attack and to tear somebody else down. I've never really been the kind of person who's been interested in tearing other people down. I've always wanted to, if something, didn't make sense to me, I like to explain to people how it didn't make sense and why it didn't make sense. And then I'm open to hear, well, maybe the reason it didn't make sense to me is because I'm missing some piece of information. And so that's where I can go back. I can explain what my point of view is, and then they can explain to me, where my point of view might be off the mark. Or maybe they'll understand, oh, hey, maybe that's what you took away from what I said wasn't what I was trying to convey, but I understand why you understood it the way that you understood it, because I did, in fact, convey it incorrectly, because I was trying to guard and attack at the same time. So I was like, instead of like communicating what I wanted to communicate, I was adding attack and vitriol into what I was saying. So I wasn't really conveying what I wanted to convey anyhow. So I think I've covered it. Anyhow, have a good one.